In today's video, I want to show about the Chorbishops, or the rural pastors, um, as different from the urban pastors or the Metropolitans. You see here on this map that I made that I have different regions marked. For example, Apostle Mark, Apostle Matthew, Apostle John, Peter, Paul, Andrew, James, and on the list goes for the travels of different um, disciples of Jesus Christ, or those who were called the apostles. I started this because I want to sort of focus on Jerusalem and emphasize that even though that place was the birthplace or the focus of Pentecost and of um, the meeting of the first apostles and then spreading out from here and spreading out north, east, south, and west, um, most of the apostles traveled and stayed as travelers. But for some of them, they were stationary. So I want to focus on Jerusalem because among these various places, uh, I previously made a video about bishops, starting with James the Just, and I had described his life, his achievements, his legacy. So I'll give a small recap on him, but basically I want to focus on the second bishop, Symeon, and then move on to a few more leading up to Macarius or before Macarius. So for James the Just, he passed away either around 62 or in some traditions 69 AD. He was the first bishop of Jerusalem and the brother of Jesus. Therefore, this specific James would be considered son of Joseph. He, the one in this image, was born approximately 20 BC and passed away, let's say, 63 AD. And his accomplishments, his deeds, include a pivotal role at the Council of Jerusalem in the year 50, between the years 49 and 51, where he advocated for a path that allowed Gentile Christians to join the church without following the Mosaic law or the Jewish Torah. His piety was widely respected by his non-believing contemporaries, and several of the apostles, including Peter, John, and Paul, would look to him as a fellow companion and Christian leader among the various parishes around the world. His martyrdom, according to tradition, he was martyred by being thrown from the temple and beaten to death with a club. So that's what this image is depicting. His writings, traditionally, it's credited the Epistle of James, or the Catholic Epistle of James, in the New Testament. And he's also associated with the Eastern liturgy, or the liturgy known as the Liturgy of St. James. As my next person would be his successor. So his successor would be Symeon of Jerusalem. And so he was the second bishop of Jerusalem. He was either a cousin or a nephew of Jesus Christ, and he was born probably around 13 BC and passed away around 107 AD. And these years, by the way, some of them are from Wikipedia, some of them are from Orthodox Wiki or the Patriarchate of Jerusalem, or like some other website. But because there's different traditions, like the Eastern traditions are usually different than the Western traditions. That's the cause for having different dates. The memory in the East is different than the memory in the West. But just for the sake of continuity and having some flow in this video, I'll just be guessing sometimes. So I'll just give you a range. But from, let's say he was born from 13 BC to 107, so that's about 120 years. His accomplishments include, number one, that he succeeded James. So he was trusted with the parish around the region or the area of Jerusalem, so South Judea or South Israel. And he was known, or one of his deeds that he's recognized for in iconography is for traveling to a nearby place called Pella, which is in Jordan. And in this place, the reason for going here was because in the year 70, the Roman army destroyed the city, like specifically the buildings and structures in Jerusalem. So the community that was previously living there had to move somewhere else. And for Jewish Christians, they moved east or went northeast towards Pella, where there was already a Greek community living there. And so in his martyrdom, according to tradition, he was crucified during the reign of Emperor Trajan. As a third bishop or successor of the throne in Jerusalem, it's Justus. So he ruled from around 107 to 113 AD. And he was, as a third bishop, he was recognized as the nephew of Jesus. He was born probably around 7 BC and passed away around 113 AD. His accomplishments, little is known about his rulings as a bishop, but he is mentioned by the church historian Eusebius of Caesarea as being in the line of Jewish bishops. So from Symeon all the way till Judas, he was one of the continuing faithful. And I want to point out that he served to ordain deacon. So in his preachings or in his regular liturgies or his service, he would present Jesus Christ. He would promote Jesus Christ, the gospel, in his life or his rituals. And so therefore, one of the converts, his name is John, he believed, and then he was ordained in the church, and he became what's called a deacon or a servant. And as a deacon, that means he could serve, like he has official duty or an office to serve in the liturgy. So as a next sort of legacy, real quick, I want to mention there's this thing called the Birkat HaMinim. It's essentially a prayer. It was developed sometime in the 2nd century. That's what I think. Although some hold an earlier date, or a date closer to 70 AD. And this prayer resulted from the difference between those who consider themselves Jewish non-Christian and those who consider themselves Jewish Christian, specifically those from the Essenic group, or what will later be called like the Ebionites, basically a desert or a non-city, like a rural kind of Jewish Christian around the areas of Palestine. And these would have a specific prayer in the synagogues that were not Christian, because in Jerusalem there were probably about 7 synagogues that were Christian, but not all of the synagogues were Christian. Some of them were clearly not. So this is just an example. The Birkat HaMinim. I picked it just to kind of connect it with the icon, possibly as a result of conversion, or an example of John, for example, the deacon, who would later become John the bishop. He might be just a case example of why those who did not convert to Christianity would say this kind of prayer. So like the text of this prayer is, for the apostates, let there be no hope, and uproot the kingdom of arrogance speedily and in our days. May the Nazarenes and the sectarians perish as in a moment. Let them be blotted out of the book of life and not be written together with the righteous, with the Zadok. You are praised, O Lord, who subdues the arrogant. In my opinion, part of the reason that there's a divergence or a separation between, within the context of Second Temple Judaism, and those who believe in the Messiah and those who don't believe in the Messiah, this is just an example of like those who leave the tradition or the non-Jesus or the non-Christian tradition. They might have this sort of attitude towards people like John the deacon. He's the 7th bishop of Jerusalem. His name is John, or John the First. He ruled for about 2 years, maybe from 117 to 119. If I had to guess, he might have been born around 84 AD and passed away around 119 AD. So he was on the younger side compared to other bishops. His accomplishments and deeds, it just stands out in history, I think, for the parish here in this area, that he was initially a keeper of the law, or someone who considered himself Jewish and wanted to maintain Jewish traditions. But upon his conversion to Jesus Christ, he joined the church and served as a deacon to present the mysteries, the body and blood, during the weekly Sunday gatherings. Next up is around the year 135, after what's called the Bar Kokhba revolt, while the Christian community was still living in Pella, the city of Jerusalem was renamed to Aelina Capitolina, and because specifically the ethnic or the Jewish community was not allowed to go to Jerusalem by the Roman soldiers or the Roman government, Pella was the main place of meeting or gathering. But Gentile Christians or people who were not Jewish were allowed to go to Aelina Capitolina. So even though the Roman emperor had built pagan structures over the ruins or over the structure of the city, for example, a temple dedicated to Zeus or a temple dedicated to Aphrodite, these places were still remembered and preserved in the memory of the Christians who lived around the community. It wouldn't be later, like about 200 years later, during the time of Macarius, that these places would be demolished, these pagan locations, and restored or rebuilt as churches, specifically for the tomb of the Holy Sepulchre of Jesus Christ, the location of his crucifixion at Golgotha, or the place of the skull, and the location of the cross, where the Holy Cross was found, or uncovered from the burial site. So this Mark, the year 135, he's the first non-Jewish or the first Gentile person to become a bishop in that place. And so if I had to guess, he was born around 76 AD and passed away around 156 AD. His accomplishing deeds include selection marking the beginning of a new era. So there's a clear transition of leadership from a Jewish Christian leadership to a Gentile Christian leadership around the year 135. So it's very clear in the memory of historians or Christians who would come 50 years later, 100 years later, 200 years later, that was the transition in leadership. So for Mark of Jerusalem, he ruled for about 20 years, continuing the tradition, the rituals that he had learned from his predecessors, and passed them on to other faithful men who would continue the same thing. So I move on to the 30th Bishop of Jerusalem. His name is Narcissus. If I had to guess, he might have been born around 99 AD and passed away around 216 AD. His accomplishments include his remembrance or his memory is known for his piety, and he was involved in what's called the Quartodeciman controversy, or arguments concerning the date of Pascha or Easter. And according to tradition, he performed a miracle by turning water into oil to keep lamps lit during the liturgy when the church was holding a service at night. He became a monk due to false accusations. So for about 25, 30 years, he left the throne, or he resigned in order to go live in the desert. So there were other bishops who succeeded him while he was still alive. But at some point, his case was cleared, and so the people asked him to return to the leadership. And in some traditions, you'll see his name restored or his name come again later, like around the year 215 or so. As the next bishop, we have Zambdas of Jerusalem. He was the 37th bishop, and there are no records of his birth. But if I had to just propose or imagine an 80-year lifespan, he might have been born around 203 AD and passed away around 283. From the records, it seems like the range of his episcopacy, or the time of him being a bishop, was between 276 to 283. And there is in the West, there is a legend by Benedictines, or the monks Benedict. This legend is called the Theban Legion, which connects Zambdas with some Egyptian Christians. Specifically, some soldiers had been asked by the Emperor Symeon to travel, to leave Egypt and go to France to do battle. But the condition for serving in the military under that trip or that mission was to offer sacrifice and offer a ritual for the emperor, or do something specifically pagan or not Christian. And so these soldiers, they're in the Theban legend, you can look it up on Wikipedia, but it's basically about 6,000 soldiers were martyred for refusing to offer the sacrifice to the Emperor Maximian. And so Zambdas is like he was alive during that time, and somehow in the Western parishes, he's remembered or connected with that story. And that's my last one. I have this icon here for the 38th Bishop of Jerusalem. He ruled from 283 to 314 AD. And assuming that he had an 80-year lifespan, he might have been around, or he might have been born around 234 AD and passed away around 314 AD. And the reason I mention these dates is just so you can have a picture of like how do these individuals relate to each other. I'm implying that they knew each other, like before they became bishops. They might have been some other kind of officer, like a deacon or an altar boy or something, serving in or a reader possibly serving in the church before they were elected to bishops, and so they would have known each other. Or that's kind of what it means to be in succession. That there's a sense of trust, not just in performing the rituals, but in having obedience or having learned methods and ways of staying faithful to traditions learned from previous leaders. So for Ermon, while nothing is known of his life specifically, the church tradition records his efforts of sending missionaries or other Christian leaders to the north or northeastern areas of the Black Sea, with the establishment of a throne at Kherson. So the Bishop Herman sent a series of bishops who would later become known as priest martyrs or hero martyrs of Kherson to the region of the Black Sea, from the Danube to the Dnieper rivers. So this is around the Crimea region. So that concludes my presentation for today. Hopefully it gives you a more visual understanding of the information from that I've just collected, as I've done different readings of various traditions, Eastern and Western, and try to compile the data of who was who, where were they living, what time ranges did they live in, what kind of documents or scrolls or books or writings were being written, what were the parties or the groups or possibly even the individuals or influential people who led the communities that spread from Jerusalem and outward onto other places. So I hope that I use ChatGPT to make those images or icons, and hopefully that helps picture or helps visualize who these people were, what they were doing, and that gives the background for what would lead to the First Ecumenical Council in 325 with Macarius. So as a reminder, these were not archbishops. They were still a variety of metropolitans and chorbishops. It wouldn't be until later in like the 4th or 5th century that you would see archbishops and then patriarchs and higher ranking sort of people. So I hope this video was helpful to you, and stay tuned as I continue to proceed with the successions, and later I'll go on towards John II and share some cool information about him.